Welcome to episode 3 of the Regional Trans Podcast, Series 2. This podcast is recorded on the lands of the Dja Dja Wurrung peoples, and I pay my deepest respects to elders past, present, and emerging. Sovereignty was never ceded, and we acknowledge the First Nations sister girls, brother boys, trans, and gender diverse people have always been part of these lands, stories, and communities. My name is Zara Jones, and today we're joining you from Thorn Harbour Country in Bendigo, where trans and gender diverse people from across regional Victoria have come together for a day of connection, storytelling, and shared learning. In this series, every episode is shaped by the participants themselves, their insights, their questions, and their lived experiences. Our aim is to amplify regional voices, celebrate our resilience, and build a deeper understanding of what it's meant to be trans in rural and regional communities. We'll be diving into personal stories, community wisdom, moments of vulnerability, and moments of joy. We invite you to listen with curiosity, care, and with an interest in growing a deeper awareness of the trans lived experience, recognizing that people's experiences are diverse, complex, and valid. The Regional Trans Podcast Series 2 has been supported through Victoria's Pride, a partnership between the Victorian Government and Midsummer. So this episode is talking about family violence and safety supports, the different forms, and what you can do yourself to be safe and where to go to get help. In this episode, we're going to be hearing from a community member who has had a lot of experience navigating family violence and can share some of their insights with us. So, Atomic, please first just introduce our listeners to a little context around the backstory of your experience.
So I'm a survivor of 4 decades of family violence. To say the least, I've been through a bit, but I don't feel alone. Very much what I've been through throughout the periods in my life is echoed by a lot of other people throughout our community. Family violence is tough. It really is. It's the one area of our life where we go out into society, we have our days out and about, and then we come home hoping to have a loving and supporting family around us, that safe area. And it obviously isn't what is going on. There's family violence, and family violence comes in a lot of different forms. So in 2023, I became one of the first qualified under the new Marin framework to identify and respond to family violence. I've done a lot of advocating, learning of the system. I think it was a bit of a shock to this system that we have to have a proud trans woman as one of the first to be qualified under that. So, it's a tough road. It's an exhausting road. It's something that we can do something about as a society, and continue to do something about. And hopefully the future generations don't have to keep going through and living what the people like we before them, learn from that and change our system. So,
and I think one of the things that probably catches people out and potentially some people that are listening around what is family violence, because I think for a lot of people, they're imagining family violence being things that leave bruises and broken bones, and that absolutely is included. But there are other forms of family violence. So I was just wondering whether you want to sort of share a little light on what that looks like and what is family violence in a broad sense.
Yeah, so family violence itself has a very broad spectrum. And you are right, a lot of people do see it as only visible. We see that same sort of thing in mental health where it's that visibility of it. But it is far deeper than that. We, know from the Royal Commission into Family Violence that the LGBTQI community is at higher risk of these violences. We've already spoken about some of this violence from our community that happens towards us. And when we talk about it in the context of family violence, it's that same behaviour that goes on within our family home. Us as children or adults being targeted for being different. It's that hate. It's suppression of our identity. Emotional abuse, psychological abuse, financial abuse is also another big one as well. Systemic abuse is another big one that I've experienced myself a lot through my life. And it doesn't how would you put it? It doesn't take away the damage that is caused. You know, bruises can heal, broken bones can heal. You know, we've got a hospital that, you know, it's a health system that can deal with that. But the psychological and the emotional abuse that comes from that it can be very profound. It's not spoken about enough. It needs to be spoken about more.
And I think too, also that the impact isn't necessarily just on the one person. It can be on the whole family scenario. So I know of a story where the trans person was outed by their ex-partner to their children, and like those young people didn't have the opportunity to have a healthy conversation with the trans person. It was managed by somebody who was not kind and who didn't provide accurate and informed supports for the young people. And so, you know, there's all these different layers that for trans people particularly, family violence can get very complicated.
Yeah, it is definitely complicated, and obviously it's when we're at our most vulnerable. And what you have just mentioned there, that is a known form of family violence. So when I say known, I'm not talking about just, you know, within our community. As part of the qualification, those forms of family violence are actually known from the Royal Commission into Family Violence, from all the advocating and the work that's been going on with our communities. You know, outing a person, refusing to reaffirm their identity, dead naming them, and this goes past just the trans and the gender diverse community as well. It goes into the sexuality community, people who are gay and lesbians and bis who may not have come out to the greater community or to their family, and they then suffer that family violence by their partner or a former partner then outing them in the exact same way, and they get the humiliation from that and the psychological abuse because, as you said, it's not a good experience. It's a very big thing for a person who is different to come out and say, hey, look, this is me. You know, and we need to provide that safe space. You know, we should be providing a safe and loving and caring home for a person to be the best version of themselves. Yeah. You know, and it's, as I said, it's not spoken about enough and it needs to be spoken about a lot. So
I feel, bouncing off what you've just said with the different little nuances of abuse that we see in LGBT communities that perhaps aren't as visible or don't exist in the same way in cisgender heterosexual couples, is converse to the forced outing and the controlling of that that loss of control over your narrative, your story, your identity. Yeah. On the other side of that, there is the identity suppression and the internalized homophobia and transphobia that can exist in relationships and dynamics.
Yeah, and we've seen... I'm going to try and do this off my memory. I think in 2021, we've seen the change in Suppression Prohibition Act come into force. You know, and that was obviously targeting religious groups and other groups that were intentionally, you know, practicing that, because we know that practice it leads to loss of life at the end of the day. It's a very toxic form of psychological abuse and emotional abuse, suppressing a person's identity, you know, and we lose lives. We have Trans Remembrance Day, which we've just had, you know, and although a lot of people might see that, you know, that sort of behaviour it's not happens to other, but it actually does. We see that the core of the behaviour happen to other identities. Like we see it weaponised against cisgendered women in general when we talk about the gendered nature of family violence. Like, you know, you're not woman enough, or your place and your role within my home is in the kitchen, and or vice versa for a man. Well, you know, the kids are mine, I look after them, you need to go and get me money and bring me money home. So it's that forced gendered role, you know, well, I'm not going to accept it. And then the psychological and emotional abuse that comes with that. So it's
definitely within queer masc relationships, stories that I've heard from online community spaces everywhere, there is this idea amongst the community, amongst service providers of, you know, it's just guys fighting, you know, hit back, or it's kind of downplayed in a really specific way. of it's
And we see that same pattern again with men in general. And obviously there's been a lot of advocating for cisgendered men, particularly around the mental health space. We know that the suicide rate within men themselves is quite high when compared to cis women. And there's still men, there's that, the myth, I suppose you can look at it saying that, men are much tougher and psychological abuse and emotional abuse doesn't affect them. Well, it does, and they need help and support as well. And what we can be doing as family members and members of our communities is not playing them down. These cuts, we talk about these cuts, that they also get cut as well. And, okay, it's two men in a relationship, but, they're still people. They have feelings and emotions and, they need to be taken seriously and they need to get the help as well. So, it's breaking those barriers and those myths.
It's an interesting dynamic just listening to you talking about those particular experiences and how the things that I've seen where these gendered norms, they're sort of pick and choose. Like when it comes to trans experiences, people will go, well, if you want to be a woman, but I see you as a man, I'm still going to beat up on you like I would if you were a man, but I wouldn't do that to a woman. And so they're like picking and choosing and going,
yeah, but I think
for trans men, if you want to be, you want to be a man, but, society is seeing them as female, then, that's okay to beat up on that person. And so there's just this conflict of, well, if you're going to be a violent person, let's call that out.
Yeah, and I think that's very important to where you're going. I was about to actually say that exact thing. I think you need to address the issue there, and that is that's the violence, isn't it?
Yes.
So violence itself doesn't discriminate. And I think we need to remember that, and we need to step away from those, I suppose, those social norms that, our species has held for a very long time, and just say it's not okay to use violence at all.
Yes.
I feel like that's a very big narrative externally looking at the trans and gender diverse community from the broader cishet world is the idea that looking at Trans Day of Remembrance and everything, violence and violence against us is so entrenched in our community that I feel like it's almost downplayed when there is family violence in towards trans and gender diverse people, because it is such a given that we will experience violence that people kind of don't view it as
that sense that it's your fault because you chose to transition instead of, you're trans
victim blaming.
And this person, and this person's a perpetrator.
I think the perpetrators have a manual that they read out of it. It's a manual of, in this situation, use this excuse to play down what I've done. So,
So I'm wondering, from your experiences, what can you offer to people in regard to, like, how do we recognize these things? So let's get onto it early. And, we've had a conversation about, when we get onto this early and the value of that.
I think there's a lot of value moving forward with getting onto this early. And we talk a lot about family violence in general these days, and we talk about educating perpetrators, and we talk about educating the system, and we talk about educating the families. But I think there needs to be more around educating the affected person and those people around them, and identifying what family violence is, and where to go and get help. I honestly believe that there are a lot of the situations that if early education was given to that family, it would stop it from escalating into these far worse situations of, physical violence, where they've been in a society where, they've accepted the emotional and psychological abuse and the narrative of, you shouldn't be doing this, you shouldn't be dressing this way, you shouldn't like men, you shouldn't like women. It's that dictatorship of that. So if we can beat that by getting into early intervention and education, educating the people of going, well, this is family violence. So what's family violence? Well, you're going to bully and pick on me because I like to wear a dress. Well, I don't know if I'm going to like wearing a dress. I'd like to give it a go, well, I'd like to have a short haircut. That person might not be trans. She might just be a cisgendered woman who just likes short hair. You know,
that's a thing too.
It's very much a thing. It's like, you know, women can be being a woman in this and a man being a person. There's so much more to a person than just that, you know, that very primal aspect of you know, reproduction and that sort of thing. So it's about creating a safe environment. It's about allowing, you know, people to be who they really are. You know, we have a law enforcement that, you know, if someone's breaking the law, then that's their job to enforce the law.
Yeah.
It's our job as parents and family members to provide a loving, caring and home for our children and our family members, you know, for them to be the best versions of themselves. And there are plenty of places now that have a lot more awareness of this. You know,
I just want to come back to, you mentioned earlier about educating the affected person. I just want to make sure that listeners aren't confused by what we're saying there and looking at victim blaming. What we're talking about is educating people to recognise where to go for help, and is that.
So I'll go back to my lived experience and where that thought process came from. Thought process came from. So, as I said earlier on, I've gone through 4 decades of family violence, and it has ranged from all different family members throughout that period, from a child right up to an adult. And when I reflect over my life and I look at what could have given me the biggest change, and that is simply someone coming up to me saying, you know what, it's okay. You're not the problem. All right. This is family violence. This is what we can do to help you. You know, we can help educate your parents or your brother or your sister or your auntie, your uncle, your grandmother. You know, we can sit down and we can talk about this. You know, and I honestly feel that if that was the conversations we were having 30, 40 years ago, we wouldn't be where we are today or where I am today. I would have had a much different life.
So that real sort of destigmatization of family violence, and because people experiencing family violence, especially from a young age, that might get then tied into self-worth, absolutely, homophobia, transphobia. I deserve this because I'm choosing to live my life this way. I'm behaving like this. This is what's happening to me.
And a better understanding of that.
Pulling back from that and going, well, no, this is...
And it's okay to be me.
This is other people.
Yeah. And it's okay for me to be me, and it's okay for you to love someone who's different. You know, and it's that when we look at education, we're not talking about formal education. We're not talking about punishing a person. It's just giving that person the knowledge to say, hey, look, you know, it's okay to be different. You know, it's okay for you to want to explore and about what you wear and how you present yourself, or, you know, or who you might love. You know, and that's the sort of information that, you know, the affected person and the affected family can have, because a person themselves who might be using family violence, they might be a victim themselves. You know, we've heard stories of these people who grow up. I did as well. I grew up in a horrible family. You know, it's echoed right across. You know, but they grew up. What did they grow up in? And then we start seeing that intergenerational, the ripple of family violence. So it's about breaking that.
Yeah.
But to be able to break that, you're not going to be able to use law to do that. You can't use, you know, punishment, locking people up to do that. You need education.
Well, you've got to recognise it first.
Correct.
What's happening within yourself, or what's happening within your family unit, and then knowing what to do about that. Like if you do recognise it, if you do recognise that this behaviour is not acceptable, this behaviour it constitutes violence, and I need to stop this from happening to me, or I need to stop doing this to somebody else if you're the perpetrator, and being okay that you know, it's okay to recognise that within yourself and ask for help.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's really important that we need to recognise that in ourselves and ask for help. One thing in my life is, you know, I come from this world that there was no help for me in the way that I needed it. You know, so every time I had to pick myself up, you know, and work everything out myself. We have a society now that help is available, and it's getting better in that aspect. There are a lot more service providers out there, you know, and the forms of family violence, as I said, they do range quite a fair bit from dead naming to bullying. You know, just picking on a person for being different. And I suppose one of the more serious forms of family violence that I suffer that I do want to talk about, because it's not spoken enough, it's systemic abuse. And that abuse is where the perpetrators, so the people doing the harm, they take the system that's designed to help people and they use it against you. And in my case, it was my family making psychological appointments with psychologists and counsellors, and then they would have the first appointment as a kid growing up, and they'd go in and feed this false narrative to the mental health field, and then I'm the one that's being interrogated and questioned over, who I am.
Yeah.
And,
and they've already got a preconceived idea.
Yeah, it creates a prejudice.
Diagnosing.
It creates a prejudice. And we see the same thing in medical environment as well, where parents and they withhold access to gender reaffirming care. That itself is also family violence. Like, we know that gender reaffirming care helps save lives. Reaffirming a person's gender or as a child, letting them explore, giving them that safe environment, you're withholding that from them.
Yeah.
Who knows? They just might be a cisgender boy or a cisgender girl who just likes to dress slightly different. It's that's their story.
Particularly
it's their
at
life.
those young ages, they're just.
But they know no different.
Yeah, that's right.
So it's not actually in our DNA to know what a gender bias is. We're actually taught this through our society. So we actually teach this as parents. So it's And
the real rigid pressure and those real rigid stereotypes and standards from that young age is what creates a lot of that internalized homophobia and transphobia, because if you don't fit within these neat little boxes, then it becomes really hard.
Yeah, and it's the same period that we're seeing the fight against the gendered nature of family violence targeting as well. It's like that's that early intervention, educating that it's not okay to treat a woman or a man that way. It's, everyone's a person. We all have our responsibilities within our families growing up, and it comes back to consent then, doesn't it? Like, if you have a cisgender woman who likes to be the homemaker and you have a cisgender man who likes to go out and be the breadwinner, well, and that works for them. That's consent. That works for them. But it's where you get a relationship where you have a person who's been forced into a role, whether it be a gendered role or an identity role. That's where
that's partnerships or family dynamics, like with children as well. Children being coerced out of an interest or a career path,
sport,
or something like that.
We see parents who aren't happy with what they may have achieved try and live vicariously through their children, and then you start yelling and screaming. We've all heard about the parents who get overexcited and get abusive at football and cricket about their kids and stuff like that. So it is a part of a broader concern of family violence, but obviously those unique forms towards the rainbow community, the dead naming, refusing them access to just explore and have fun and be children, and that's the damaging part. It's psychological abuse, it's emotional abuse. It's just,
and some of that I fear is, or I feel, from some of the parents and some of the young people that I've spoken to, the narrative surrounds a fear. The fear that the parents have that their young person is going to be trans if they allow that, and having this knowledge that if they're trans, they're going to be disadvantaged through life. And so instead of going, well, we need to change that narrative and create a space where trans folks can just navigate life without harm, they limit that person's experience of life and try to fit them into this cisgender.
And that's where the
box.
harm comes from.
Absolutely.
That's where the harm comes from.
Through kindness, they create harm, and they can't see that actually you're creating harm, but you're also perpetuating a much bigger picture, because if they actually are trans and they're not just exploring, then that limitation is what creates so much hurt within inside the person and transphobia.
So when we look at that aspect of it, you've got this child who is suffering phobia and suppression, and they spend, say, 5 to 6 years of their childhood, and we know how important those early years are of a child's life. So instead of this child living a healthy, normal life, and when I say normal, I'm not using it in the context of cisgender or anything. I'm just talking a normal expected life, access to education, free to explore.
Thriving.
Yeah, you're talking about that 6 years. We're saying 6 years, just it's a number. it's now stepped backwards because they've been in the survival mode, haven't they? There's confusion, there's conflict, there's a lot of damage that's been done. Whereas if they were just simply, accepted for being different, loved and supported for who they are, they could have had 6 years of positive development. They could have gone on to increase their cognitive functions and, other aspects of their life that, can then benefit them later on as adults. So what's the real problem here? Is it that my child's different, or is it that I'm so fearful that I don't want my child to be different because I might be hated at the local sporting club, or, felt different or something, maybe at a church? I don't want, God forbid that, God had given me a child that's different. It's that's the damage that's being done, because you can't get that time back.
Yeah.
It's a really important time in people's lives where we should be free to explore and, have access to that information and that support, instead of surviving family violence and psychological abuse. So,
and if somebody is trans, then let's focus our energy on that being something we celebrate.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I celebrate
as positive rather than limited.
I celebrate my name day as opposed to my actual birthday. Why can't you just celebrate their actual birthday? And I've met a lot of, obviously in the field, I can't go into too many details because of privacy, but I do help and assist a lot of people within our community with family violence. And I am seeing a lot of diverse families where this is celebrated. It's just normal to them.
Yeah.
And those families are out there, those communities are out there.
They're just thriving.
Yeah, absolutely. They are. They're absolutely thriving. And it's great to see. But it's those pockets that we still see within our society, whether it be online or within the family home, that we need to, to help try and change.
That's the question I have, especially considering your lived experience and the amount of knowledge and work and everything you've done within family violence communities in the sector, is I know in my interactions within the community, there is that fear of accessing services, especially as trans people. It's, how am I going to be perceived? How is it going to go? Am I going to be treated with respect? Am I going to be cared for? Is my relationship going to be seen as valid and real? What would your advice be to service providers or to community that perhaps are wanting help but are unsure as to how to go about it, how to advocate for themselves, or people watching who provide family violence services who want to do better for the trans community and really stand up and be those strong allies, because we need allies?
Yeah, so you're talking about a lot of barriers, and they're barriers, and these are barriers that we face, that a lot of people just don't, I suppose, understand. Because, it'd be great to be able to walk into a service provider where, you're not questioned over the sound of your voice or, what you're wearing. And, it's, from that perspective, these are very much challenges. And given the dangers associated with family violence, it's a time where we shouldn't have to be facing those challenges, but we do. We do. So I think within Victoria, and obviously I can speak within this because of the Marin framework, this is state legislation here. A lot of these organisations are doing the right thing moving forward. We have the intersectionality of the Marin framework. It's about making sure that when these complaints are made within their organisations, that these organisations take these complaints seriously and educate their staff members who may have done the wrong thing. And this might not have been intentional. It's not malicious. It's just they've done the wrong thing. And it's about going, well, okay, this has happened. Let's learn from it. Let's quickly fix it. And that's important. That's really important, that when it comes to family violence, these organisations are on the ball to fix these problems straight away, because they interfere with the provision of services. So if you take an extra week to fix that and get that person in for an intake appointment, that's an extra week that they're sitting in crisis. And we need to change that. And that's not a response from Victoria Police. That's not a response from the hospitals or anything like that. So this is a response from the actual service providers themselves, making sure that they're changing that culture within their staff, taking the complaints seriously, making sure that they're not dismissing the concerns. And probably when it comes to service providers, the most important thing is that they need to sit down and listen to each individual. We have had a panel here that although we are all gender diverse and trans, but every single one of us are different, significantly different. Our stories, our family violence, everything that we suffer, right, it's different, every single one of us. So these people need to go into each intake appointment with a clean, open mind, no prejudice, no predefined expectations of what they're going to encounter. You know, that is extremely important. It's about letting that person tell us what is important to them, what's hurting them, and giving them a voice, giving them a safe space, giving them the voice to be able to share that. Yeah, and that's probably the most important thing with service providers to make sure they're doing.
Absolutely. So you've mentioned the Marram framework a couple of times, and I'm just wondering if some of the folks who are listening may not know what that is. Is there a way? I know it's quite a big.
There is a bit to it
to work around, but is there some way that you could summarize that just so that people understand what that?
Yeah. So the Marram framework came out of the Royal Commission into Family Violence, and it just, in brief, it's just a multi-agents response, which includes the likes of Victoria Police, Department of Justice. The Orange Door, Thorn Harbour also has a family violence sector. We'll see the Orange Door. So I think I said Orange Door. You've got CNV. You've got BDAC also have family violence services as well. We also have community-based services for the CALD community, and it's a set of guidelines and a structure that governs that, and it provides services and ongoing support for family violence. Under that, there's a qualification, and I would love for more people to go do this, particularly people with lived experience. There's a qualification you can go on and take. It's called a course in identifying and responding to family violence risks. And then you can also have that qualification to help people and guide them within our community to the appropriate services. So it's a lot. It was quite a big change to our system.
Yeah.
From where it was previously. So
I think that course sounds like a really wonderful opportunity for people to recognise, because I know that we do hear a lot of stories from community members that talk about family violence, and it is very much, I think, just accepted in a lot of the community that this is just what I have to live with. And I think it'd be really valuable for people to be able to identify and respond in appropriate ways. How,
and my role in the community is not to be a knight in shining armor and save people. Like it's very specific. It's about just simply identifying family violence. It's about helping people understand what family violence is, and it's about working with those other organisations to make sure these people have the right tools available and get access to the right services. And that's important. That's that intervention. But I think we as a society, we could still do better. I think we could be educating people at a much earlier stage to just stamp out family violence and inequality, and not the binary inequality, but just inequality in general, which includes the binary and obviously beyond the binary. So education, I think, is really important for that moving forward.
Absolutely. And I feel that education perhaps needs to be a bit broadened. I think it's amazing. I see a lot on TV ads geared towards younger men around, and men in general calling out, call out your friends when they make jokes. Be careful how you interact with people, but I feel like it would also be very important to educate everyone broadly, especially people who are currently experiencing or at risk of family violence, to actually recognize, oh, okay, this is what gaslighting looks like, because some forms of abuse can be so insidious and so hidden that it's hard to pick what is actually happening. And when people have that knowledge and that understanding, then that is empowering them where they've been really disempowered.
Yeah.
Yeah. And obviously I have a young family of my own. My family's going to grow up, and obviously I'm providing a safe, loving, caring, free from family violence. And as they grow up, though, we need to keep them aware of what family violence is, because I don't want my children walking straight out into a violent and dangerous relationship, because we know that they segregate the victims from their families. So it's about making sure that, okay, you might have a group of people over here who aren't experiencing family violence, but they need to be made aware of what family violence is. So it doesn't keep moving.
Yeah.
And perpetrators will move. And we see that in the family dynamic. Obviously, we're here talking about family dynamics with the LGBTQI. We see it. You've got a person who's come out within the family about being gay. So that person who now knows goes behind their back and starts colluding with the other family members and outing them for being gay. And they start, getting the numbers, and they humiliate them and pick on them and bully them. So the best way to deal with it, it's visibility. We use visibility a lot. Education and visibility.
Yeah. Change starts with awareness, doesn't it? You've got to be able to know that there's something there that needs to be changed.
Yeah, because otherwise it's too late.
Change. Yeah.
Otherwise it's too late. By the time people realise what's going on, you're talking, we've lost lives, and that's just not good enough. So,
yeah.
But go back to service providers. Obviously, it's that willingness and just changing the way, I suppose, that they respond to complaints, because everyone's different. What might be important to me might not be important to you.
Absolutely.
So
beautiful. Is there anything else that you'd like to add for people to be aware of, or to be on the lookout for in regards to family violence or responses?
I think it's, I suppose, just the psychological and emotional abuse. It is prevalent. It is just as dangerous as what physical violence, if not more, because it attacks the inside of a person, and that then transforms into other forms of self-harm and dangers. Systemic abuse. Stop believing what just people say about people. I've got a good, wonderful relationship with my family, and if I take them to the doctors and stuff like that, it's my doctor trusts me and my family. We've got that relationship, and I let my children speak when it comes to how they're feeling and what's going on and what's upsetting them. So it's about keeping things transparent and helping our members of family. It's a huge thing coming out.
Yeah.
It's massive coming out, particularly for trans people. All right. And that's because with trans and gender diverse people, we can't hide it. No. With people for sexuality, it's much easier for people to hide it, isn't it? How do you hide a 6-foot trans woman? I think it's an issue that you've probably had as well.
Yeah, I get called out quite a lot, and particularly my voice and my height. Yeah. I myself. But it's quite silly, because there are actually women who do have voices that are deep. There are women who
are tall,
cis women,
who are tall.
Yeah, we're not the Lone Rangers there. There are other folks of the same gender who are experiencing the same sort of things, and I guess
so the cisgender women in my family are actually quite tall.
Yeah.
So my whole family is quite tall. So
version of what women should look like and what men should look like, and all of that sort of stuff.
Yeah, and that's right. You're not woman enough, and it's there's a lot of that. You go back to it's the same arguments, isn't it? It's like, oh no, I want my kid to grow up and be a man. I want him to love a woman, and it's that real ingraining. It's like, well, that person might not be that way.
Well, it's the irony, because it's saying be ordinary, but be extraordinary.
But who wants to be ordinary?
Exactly. They want you to
be individual
be
and amazing, but fit in this very tiny box
absolutely.
here.
And that's that same behaviour that we see within the family dynamic, and that's what is considered family violence. It's that damaging emotional, psychological abuse. It wears people down.
Yeah.
If you really cared about your family member, if you really loved your family member, you'd care that what you're doing is hurting them, and you would stop it. You would do everything you could to make sure that you were not hurting that person, and you would listen and you would learn.
Yeah.
So maybe some people just need to take a step back, all right, and actually work out if they actually understand how to care for their family.
Well, yeah, absolutely.
I'm putting the onus on the person doing the wrong thing here.
No. I totally agree with you, and I think that for a lot of people, it's this sense of caring for somebody or loving somebody. Everyone has a different perspective of that. but I think take away your ownership of that person and let that person be the best version of themselves
Absolutely.
that they can be.
Absolutely.
And that's how you be the best parent that you can be
Absolutely.
by going, you're you and you don't have to be me.
Yeah, but we're humans.
Yeah.
We are humans. We're not designed to be slaves. I'm not too sure how many times throughout our history that, someone's tried enslaving humans. It hasn't really gone too well for mankind, and it's the same as at home. Like, we're not slaves. Creativity doesn't come from suppression.
Yeah, that's right.
It's creativity comes from giving people the ability to express themselves
And explore and space.
explore.
Yeah.
And we need to be providing those safe homes for our family members to do that.
Absolutely.
Because what could people do? Like if you weren't sitting there debating my identity and my gender, and you actually wanted to sit down and crunch numbers and go and explore the world, and what could we do? What could we do if these debates were not happening? If everyone just accepted it as normal and we just got on with our lives?
We'd all have so much more time for everything.
Yeah. The things that bring us joy.
Yes.
And then we create a happier, healthier life for everybody.
Yeah, well, for our family, for the people that we love and care for. So it's, we've still got a long way to go, but there is a lot of change.
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of changes through the system in 4 decades. But there are a lot of positives. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people listening to these podcasts and just reaffirming and keeping on the ball when it
just
comes
reflect.
to family violence.
How are you impacting the people in your life?
I think that's the reflection that needs to happen, is how people are impacting them, their family. What's your brother, your sister going through that you don't know? What internal struggles are they going through, because you're not making a safe space for that person to talk about it, because they don't want to be crucified for being different. So.
Well, I think that's a beautiful space to wind up. So thank you so much for coming in and talking about this. It is a tough subject. So for people who have been impacted by listening to this episode of the podcast, please reach out to support services such as QLife, such as Thorn Harbour,
1-800 RESPECT as well, Safe Steps.
Yeah.
Any local mental health or just organisation locally, you'll find they're all starting to become interconnected as well. So if they can't help you, they'll be able to point you in the right direction. So.
Yeah, and if you're not local to Victoria, please just Google and reach out to services local to your area. Yeah. And be kind to each other.
And stay
be kind
safe.
to yourself. Yeah. Thanks, folks. We'll see you in episode 4.
Oxbridge. I just do what I do.